What if the world has been ignoring one of the most powerful ideas ever created?
That could change how humanity lives, leads, and connects. A philosophy that says,
I am because we are.
But what if I told you this truth was never meant to stay hidden, only forgotten?
Because in a divided world, driven by power, profit, and isolation, Ubuntu offers something radical.
The world is more connected than at any other time in history. We can send a message across continents in seconds. We can trade, travel, collaborate, and broadcast our thoughts instantly. And yet loneliness is rising. Trust is declining. Communities are fragmenting. We live in an age of unprecedented proximity and unprecedented separation. Across the globe, societies are wrestling with division, political polarization, economic inequality, cultural mistrust. Entire systems designed to reward the individual while quietly weakening the collective. And in the middle of this global tension, a question emerges. What if the solution to our modern crisis is not new? What if it is ancient? What if it has been here all along? In southern Africa, there is a word spoken in different forms across languages like isiZulu and isiXhosa, a word that carries centuries of wisdom in just a few syllables. Ubuntu, a philosophy that translates loosely to I am because we are. But translation does not capture its depth. Ubuntu is not simply kindness. It is not charity. It is not a slogan. It is a way of understanding what it means to be human. Long before colonial borders carved the continent into fragments, long before modern political ideologies took shape, communities across sub-Saharan Africa organized their societies around relational identity. A person was not an isolated unit. A person was a node in a living network. Your humanity was tied to the humanity of others. Your dignity was affirmed through community. Your success was incomplete if it excluded those around you. In many African villages, survival itself required cooperation: farming, herding, child-rearing, protection. The land did not reward radical individualism. It demanded interdependence. And from this lived reality emerged a moral framework. If one suffers, all feel the weight. If one thrives, all benefit. If one is dehumanized, the entire community is diminished. This was not abstract philosophy debated in distant halls. It was practiced daily. When a child misbehaved, the village corrected the child. When a family struggled, neighbors intervened without invitation. When a conflict arose, the goal was not punishment alone, but restoration. Because the worst fate was not poverty, it was isolation. Ubuntu understood something modern systems often forget. A human being cannot flourish alone. But then, history shifted. Colonialism arrived with a different worldview. A worldview built on hierarchy, extraction, and separation. Borders were drawn with rulers across living communities. Ethnic groups were categorized, identities were reshaped. Economies were redesigned around competition and resource removal rather than communal resilience. The philosophy of I am because we are collided with a new message. I am because I conquer. I am because I accumulate. I am because I dominate. Over time, these competing visions left scars. Political systems inherited colonial structures. Urbanization pulled millions away from traditional community networks. Global capitalism intensified the focus on the individual as the primary economic unit. Ubuntu did not disappear, but it was pressured. And yet, in moments of extreme crisis, it resurfaced with undeniable power. During apartheid in South Africa, division was not theoretical, it was engineered. Laws were written to fragment, segregate, and dehumanize. Entire communities were forcibly removed. Human worth was ranked and codified. It would have been understandable for bitterness to define the future. But as the country approached democratic transition, something remarkable happened. Leaders like Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu invoked Ubuntu not as a nostalgic ideal, but as a strategic necessity.
Another person who often reflected on the meaning of Ubuntu was Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I believe we all know he taught us a great deal as chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He once said famously, "We think of ourselves far too frequently as just individuals, separated from one another. Whereas you are connected and what you do affects the whole world. When you do it well, it spreads out. It is for the whole community." Of course, as I talk of Ubuntu, you are all aware that there are many global challenges confronting all our countries. And in my view, all of these require our cooperation. The challenges include gender equality, poverty, the gross abuse of human rights. These are often so immense in their impact that I believe what they tell us as leaders and communities is we need to do more to actively live and breathe Ubuntu. Action that is framed by justice for all people, by the practice of fairness and equality, regardless of race, gender, or social status. As a global community, we must be joined in addressing climate change, migration, disease, human trafficking, terrorism, and hunger. The help we give must uplift communities and not increase their vulnerability. And of course, as Deputy Minister Mashego Dlamini has said, Ubuntu is the common thread in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because without the desired level of collaboration, we cannot achieve the meaningful change anticipated in the SDGs.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was not built on revenge. It was built on the belief that healing required acknowledgement, accountability, and reintegration. The idea was radical in a world accustomed to victor's justice. The oppressor's humanity was not denied. The victim's suffering was not minimized. The nation's future was not sacrificed to endless retaliation. This was Ubuntu applied to statecraft. It did not erase pain. It did not eliminate inequality. It did not solve every structural injustice, but it prevented civil war, and it offered the world a different model of transition. A model that said reconciliation is not weakness, it is strength guided by wisdom. Pause for a moment and consider the global landscape today. Nations divided by ideology, communities divided by class, digital platforms amplifying outrage. The architecture of modern life rewards attention, not understanding. It rewards speed, not reflection. It rewards personal branding over collective responsibility. In this environment, Ubuntu sounds almost inconvenient. It demands that we see ourselves in people we disagree with. It demands that we recognize our dependence on strangers. It demands that success be redefined beyond personal gain. But what if this inconvenience is precisely what makes it necessary? In the corporate world, leadership theories are shifting. Psychological safety, collaborative cultures, stakeholder capitalism. The language is modern, but the core insight is ancient. Organizations perform better when individuals feel connected, valued, and mutually responsible. In public health, we learned during global pandemics that individual choices affect entire populations. A virus does not respect ideological boundaries. Community health is not a private matter. In environmental policy, climate change has forced humanity to confront a truth Ubuntu articulated centuries ago. We are bound together. The emissions of one region alter the weather of another. Consumption in one economy shapes survival in another. The myth of absolute independence collapses under global reality. Yet there is tension here. Ubuntu is not naive collectivism. It does not erase individuality. It does not demand uniformity. It recognizes uniqueness within relationship. You matter, but you matter because we matter. And this subtle balance is where many societies struggle. How do you protect individual rights without dissolving communal bonds? How do you promote ambition without fostering isolation? How do you encourage innovation without sacrificing solidarity? Ubuntu does not offer a policy manual. It offers a lens. Through this lens, leadership is service. Authority is relational. Wealth is measured not only by accumulation, but by impact. Consider the difference between charity and Ubuntu. Charity can be hierarchical. One gives, the other receives. The power dynamic remains intact. Ubuntu reframes the act. When I help you, I am restoring myself. When your dignity is affirmed, my humanity expands. This perspective changes everything. It changes how children are raised. It changes how conflicts are resolved. It changes how economies are imagined. And yet, there is a risk in romanticizing it. Modern Africa is not a perfect embodiment of Ubuntu. The continent faces political corruption, inequality, ethnic tension, and economic struggle. Urban centers are growing rapidly. Traditional structures are evolving. Global influences are reshaping values. Ubuntu must adapt. The question is not whether it survives unchanged. The question is whether its essence can guide transformation. Young Africans in cities like Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Lagos are navigating hybrid identities. They are global and local, digital and traditional, entrepreneurial and communal. They are asking new questions. Can technology strengthen community instead of fragmenting it? Can African philosophy shape global innovation rather than merely consuming it? Can Ubuntu inform artificial intelligence ethics, global governance, and corporate responsibility? These questions are no longer abstract. As artificial intelligence advances, societies debate alignment and ethics. How should machines treat humans? How should data be governed? Who benefits from automation? Western frameworks often center on rights and rules. Ubuntu introduces another dimension: relationship, context, shared flourishing. Imagine an AI system designed not only to maximize efficiency, but to protect communal well-being. Imagine economic models that measure success not only by GDP, but by relational health. It sounds ambitious, but every dominant global philosophy once sounded local. There was a time when democracy was an experiment in a few city-states. There was a time when human rights were not universally recognized. There was a time when the idea of global cooperation seemed unrealistic. Ubuntu could be dismissed as cultural heritage, or it could be recognized as strategic wisdom. Here is the pattern interrupt. What if Ubuntu is not just something the world needs from Africa? What if it is something Africa needs to reclaim for itself in a new form? Post-colonial states often adopted imported systems without fully integrating indigenous frameworks, education models, economic structures, governance styles. Many were necessary adaptations to a global order, but some left philosophical gaps. Recentering Ubuntu does not mean rejecting modernity. It means grounding modernization in relational ethics. It means asking whether growth is inclusive, whether justice restores, whether power unites or divides. And this reclamation has implications beyond Africa, because the crisis of the 21st century is not only technological, it is relational. We have mastered tools, we have not mastered togetherness. Loneliness is now described as a public health epidemic in parts of the world. Social trust metrics have declined in multiple democracies. People report feeling unseen despite constant online visibility. Ubuntu challenges the assumption that hyper-individual freedom automatically produces fulfillment. Freedom without connection can become emptiness. In many African languages, greetings are not perfunctory. They are inquiries into well-being. They acknowledge presence. They affirm existence. To greet is to recognize. Recognition is powerful. In conflicts around the world, dehumanization precedes violence. Groups are reduced to labels. Stories are flattened. Complexity is erased. Ubuntu resists reduction. It insists that no person is disposable. This does not mean excusing wrongdoing. It means refusing to strip away humanity, even in accountability. The Truth and Reconciliation process demonstrated the difficulty of this path. It required victims to confront perpetrators. It required perpetrators to confess publicly. It demanded emotional endurance. But it also revealed something profound. When people are seen fully, transformation becomes possible. Now consider the global economic order. Wealth concentration has reached historic levels. Entire regions supply raw materials while others accumulate disproportionate value. Labor is often invisible behind finished products. Ubuntu would ask uncomfortable questions. Who benefits? Who bears the cost? Whose humanity is overlooked in supply chains and financial systems? These questions are not anti-capitalist by default. They are anti-dehumanization. Ubuntu is not opposed to prosperity. It is opposed to prosperity that fractures community. And perhaps this is where the philosophy becomes most relevant to the future. The 21st century will be defined by interdependence, whether we acknowledge it or not. Climate migration, digital economies, global health networks, resource scarcity, cybersecurity. No nation is an island. The illusion of separation is increasingly fragile. Ubuntu offers a psychological shift. Instead of fearing interdependence, it normalizes it. Instead of viewing connection as vulnerability, it views it as strength. This mindset influences diplomacy. It influences education. It influences entrepreneurship. Imagine classrooms that teach children not only to compete, but to collaborate meaningfully. Imagine media ecosystems that reward bridge-building narratives. Imagine political campaigns that frame national interest within global responsibility. This is not utopian fantasy. It is strategic recalibration. And yet, adopting Ubuntu globally would require humility. It would require acknowledging that valuable wisdom does not flow in a single direction, from north to south, from west to east. It would require listening. There is a subtle irony here. Africa has often been portrayed as a continent in need of solutions from elsewhere. But within its philosophical heritage lies a framework capable of informing global discourse. Ubuntu is not a relic, it is a resource. It reminds us that dignity is shared, that success is relational, that humanity is collective. In the end, the world does not face a shortage of intelligence. It faces a shortage of integration. We have innovation without cohesion, connectivity without community, information without wisdom. Ubuntu does not promise to eliminate conflict or erase suffering. It does not pretend that human nature is purely altruistic. It acknowledges imperfection, but it insists that our fates are intertwined. And perhaps that is the message the world most needs to hear. Not as poetry, not as branding, but as operating principle. Because in a fragmented age, the greatest act of strategy may be to remember that no one stands alone. I am because we are. And if we forget the we risk losing the I.